Bass Case Season 2, Episode 5, Dorian Mode. Modes, you've probably heard it. Basically, modes are scales. But scales are not always modes. For example, a half-whole diminished scale. That's likely not a mode. A whole tone scale, that's not a mode. But Dorian mode it's part of the Greek modes. And it and other Greek modes, obviously that's been around since antiquity, and you know how long that's been. But here they are in order. Ionian mode, which is your major scale, and Dorian mode, which we're going to be talking about today. And then that's followed by Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, which is just your natural minor, and then your Locrian mode. And all of these modes, which are essentially scales, I don't want to lose that fact, all of these modes comport with a particular chord quality, meaning that all of these scales line up with a particular chord. So if we're dealing with C major scale, Ionian mode, right, that lines up with a C major chord. So if I see a C major chord on a sheet, or someone says it's in C major, then all the notes of C major scale / Ionian mode fit that nicely and diatonically. Dorian mode, and it lines up with minor chords. D Dorian fits over a D minor chord, just to put it simply. Now, one more little fact. All the modes, all these Greek modes that I'm talking about, run off the major scale, the Ionian scale, right? So I'm going to use C major as my reference point. And once again, C major scale is C Ionian mode. So I'll take C major scale and C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, and you got your scale. But if I take that C major scale and slice off the C and start on D and go all the way to D past the C octave, that's Dorian. So it's D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D. There's your Dorian mode. It is that simple. But you have to know your major scales, and see one of my previous episodes on learning your major scales and how important that is. When I was a young player, but before I went to music school, I was interested in modes. I would read articles about rock guitarists and how they were using modes in their solos, and I became very like, what is that exactly? And I didn't really understand it until I got to music school, and it made sense to me. Now, I've already loaded these videos onto YouTube right now, and they're getting more than a few looks. So I think people I wasn't the only one interested in modes. I think a lot of bass players are very interested in modes, and you should be, because they're very, very fertile ground for developing lines and giving you the ideas of what to play when you see a chord. So in this first one, I'm going to play C major scale to the ninth, meaning I'm going to play C to C octave and then move up to the note D. And then I'm going to take that same hand shape, slice off the C, and start that C major scale on D and have Dorian mode. And keep in mind, this is the Dorian mode. I'm going to start this on fourth finger and see via the video how effective this is and economic. So here's number one. Okay, first, C major. And I'm playing it up to the ninth. Let me slow it down a little bit. D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D. And then back down. Right. And keeping in mind that D Dorian it's just C major, but starting the scale, the C major scale on D. So I'm slicing off the C and playing the rest of the pattern. And notice it wants to resolve the C. So there's Dorian. C. Okay. Now, for the second one, I'm going to start the D Dorian mode on first finger, which is the way I teach it to a lot of my students initially. And there's a shift in there right after I play the first four notes, the tetrachord, right? Okay, now here's number 2. Okay, now here's D Dorian again, but this time starting on the first finger on D. To the 9th. Right, just 1, 3, 4, 1, shift, 1, 3, 4 again, 1, 3, and then backwards. It's a little bit slower. Making it sound more like a walking bass line. Just the points of resolution, leading tones. Now, same as you heard for number 2, or you'll see on the YouTube video for number 2, I'm going to start Dorian mode with the first finger, but I'm also going to add the arpeggio to it, basically the chord. So I'm going to play the scale, and then I'm going to play the D, F, A, C, E, the arpeggio that goes along with it. So here's number 3. Okay, and nothing against starting on the 4th finger. You should know how to do that. And not that this is the only one starting on the 1st finger, but it is a very effective one, when I'm thinking about. So it is the one. Now, just real quick, here's the arpeggio. Scale. To the 9th. Arpeggio with it. Just the arpeggio real slow. A bit slower maybe. It's so effective too, knowing scales and arpeggios. Just kind of a typical Bach lick, over D minor to G7, just arpeggiating. And then arpeggiating, nailing down the G7 with a half whole tone scale. But arpeggio. Backwards. So effective. Really a lot of things that you can generate. Okay, now that's the nuts and bolts, the mechanics. Now I'm going to put it into use. So with this one, I'm just going to take that 4th finger Dorian, and I'm just going to play some walking lines. Lines that would fit nicely over a D minor 7 chord, like you would hear on So What or Impressions or Little Sunflower by Freddie Hubbard. So here's number 4, just some walking. Okay, just some walking. And I'm going to start off with that fourth finger pattern. And notice what I did. I started using that C sharp, which is not in the Dorian scale, but it's a nice leading tone into D. And I used it up an octave too. B, C, C sharp, D. Okay, now I'm going to take the Dorian mode that starts on my first finger that I demonstrated earlier, and then I'm going to do some walking in Dorian with that hand shape. And I'm going to include some arpeggios in there. And think about it like this. I'm taking the scales and, I'm encouraging you to learn them at least in one position with one fingering, and then, but more importantly, to put them into action. I don't think there's any point in learning scales on your instrument if you don't use them. And I think you should learn scales. So when you're learning scales, you've got to find a way to use them and deal with something like that. I mean, why would you learn scales and not use them in some form? And I know a lot of players that do, especially at a music school. So here it is. Here's number 5. Okay, more walking, and I'm just going to use the first finger. Maybe use some arpeggio. Some chromaticism. Using that. One more time, a little bit slower. Okay, now this next one, number 6, you're just going to, it's a simple 5-note walking pattern. I'm basically going up the scale and back. I'm going D, E, F, G, A, and then coming back down. And it's a nice, simple walking line that would fit over a D minor 7. And it was the first walking line I learned. My first jazz director, who was a trombonist, showed it to me. And I use it for a lot of these emerging bass players that are in my studio and ensembles, and it's so effective. So here is number 6, just a simple walking line. Okay, one more, just a simple line to play if you're faced with D minor, especially if you're faced with it against So What or Impressions, and you got multiple measures of D minor. This is the first walking line that I learned. I'm just going up to the 5th. The 5th and back. And then you start expanding upon that. Kind of almost a blues type scale. Okay, the last one. This is a simple figure. It's more of an eighth note type line, and it's a head, if you will, that I learned from the same man. And it's from a book titled Jazz Tunes for Improvisation by Dan Hurley. And it's sort of a counterfaction or a takeoff on So What. But moreover, it fits on the bass nicely, and it shows how not just, we talk about walking lines and all that. This is sort of a head or a solo type figure that you would play. So here's number 7. Okay, just one more. It was the head. I think it was the first head that I learned, and it was out of one of Dan Hurley's books. I think it was Jazz Tunes for Improvisation, and it was a takeoff on the whole impression So What thing. Move it up to half step, right? Same line. And then back. Okay, like I said, all these videos are on my Bass Case podcast channel on YouTube and marked in the order that I listed them here. Now, my feeling is that you should be able to execute the Dorian mode in a couple of positions, the one starting on 4th finger and on 1st finger. Improv some walking lines and play that Dan Hurley head, to generate some 8th note lines. If you have any questions, email me at phil@basscase.co. I'll talk to you soon.